Memory. It's the key to our identity.
Without memory, we're nothing.
It's who we are.
Memory hackers. Right now.
Scripture tells us that obedience is a virtue. Servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh. So it would seem that disobedience to a legitimate authority is sinful. But what if that authority figure commands something that is sinful? St. Thomas Aquinas wrote, "Sometimes the things commanded by a superior are against God. Therefore superiors are not to be obeyed in all things." In his Summa, St. Thomas also quotes St. Augustine, who wrote, "If the emperor commands one thing and God another, you must disregard the former and obey God." But what about individuals who have entered religious orders and have taken vows of obedience? Must they obey their superiors in all things? St. Thomas concluded, "Religious profess obedience as to the regular mode of life, in respect of which they are subject to their superiors, provided, however, such things not be contrary to God or to the rule they profess, for obedience in this case would be unlawful." St. Thomas was not inventing anything new here. This was addressed by others before St. Thomas. For instance, during the time of the Arian heresy, much of the church espoused beliefs that were contrary to traditional Catholicism. In fact, at that time, St. Jerome wrote, "The whole world groaned and marveled to find itself Arian." So at that time, Pope St. Julius I wrote to the bishops of the East and warned them of heretical teachings. "Do not fall into error, my dearest brothers. Do not be led astray by diverse and alien teachings. For you have the provisions of the apostles and other apostolic men, and the canons. Depend on these, surround yourselves with these, delight in these, arm yourself with these, that supported, surrounded, delighted, and armed by these against all enemies, you might withstand attack." Since Pope St. Julius's letter was cited by Gratian in his compilation of decretals, it's considered to be incorporated into the Church's historic canon law. And what kind of authority did these decretals have in the Church? Well, according to Gratian, decretal letters are thus legally equivalent to the canons of councils. As I noted in prior videos, the primatial councils of Toledo wouldn't ordinarily be dogmatic. However, the following passage was included by Gratian in his compilation of decretals, so therefore it was incorporated to the historic canon law. The Eighth Council of Toledo weighed the obligation of obedience against whether we should resist sinful commands. Although one must carefully guard against being forced to choose between two evils, if an inescapable danger compels one to perpetrate one of the two evils, we must choose the one that makes us less guilty. We should investigate which of the two is less, and which is more serious by the acuity of pure reason. When we perform a crime because of a promise, we hold God's commands in contempt through pride, harm our neighbors with faithless cruelty, and cut ourselves down with a still crueler sword. Gratian also cites Pope St. Gregory the Great. When the mind is torn between greater and lesser sins, if absolutely no path of escape is open without sin, lesser evils are always to be chosen. For when there are walls on all sides and the way of escape is closed to prevent flight, the one fleeing throws himself off the wall where it is lowest. So, when we are torn between dubious choices, we expediently submit to the lesser evil, lest we sin without indulgence by committing the greater. So, it would seem that, if through reason and a great deal of discernment, we have determined that there have been changes in the Church commanded by the bishops, the Pope, and the Second Vatican Council, and that those changes are contrary to the laws of God, we can't just tell ourselves that we are blameless for being obedient and following those commands. Please note that the Code of Canon Law of 1917 did not abrogate the historic canon law. It merely codified it and tried to organize it. The historic canon law of the Church, which can never be abrogated regarding to faith or morals, tells us that we must resist the greater of two evils. We must resist and disobey what seems to be heretical, and in doing so we will obey God. Well, I hope you enjoyed this installment. We'll be back again in about a week with another one, but in the meantime, please check out my Facebook page, which is linked down below. On a daily basis, I post additional content which you won't see on this YouTube channel, And also, please pray for the church.
Get up, stand up, individual, don't give up the fight. You get up, you stand up for your right. You get up, you stand up.